we're pretty excited and we want to let you guys know.
Well, that's great, and you should be well deserved, and especially on the engagement part. That's really great that y'all got that. Okay, so next we have the roll call of board members. Here.
Here. Here. Here.
Okay, very good. And now we need the approval of the agenda for this month. For this month. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? That passes. And now we need the approval of the minutes for August 21st. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Then minutes are approved as submitted. And the main thing we have on our agenda today, or the only really thing we have on our agenda today is a continuation of the discussion we started last month on planning board procedures. And I think Mr. Yuba is going to be leading that.
So we sent those out in August. You all stated that you needed, that you were going to take some time to review them and provide us comments today. And I think we are prepared to take your comments and make any changes to the proposed orders. Or the proposed procedures. So hopefully you'll be able to adopt something.
Okay. So how do we want to start?
I know Mr. Knorr sent some proposed changes out to the board, and I don't know whether you would like to go through the procedures. We just go through them and discuss each section, or whether you just want to go through the proposed changes. I'm free to do whatever you all wish to do.
Probably easier to go through each section, and that way anybody who has any kind of comments at all will be able to chime in at that point.
Okay, so obviously the first section is the purpose, which is to establish general operating procedures for the Buncombe County Planning Board in compliance with state law and county regulations. Do you want to call these rules of procedure, or do you want to call them operating procedures? I think that just so that we can be consistent throughout the document. All right, first change. We will change these from operating procedures to rules of procedure. All right, so section number 2 is the procedure statement. So once again, that this is the Buncombe County Planning Board, which will be referred to as board throughout the document. The office of the board is the Planning and Development Department at 46 Valley Street. I don't think that's it. Membership pursuant to the ordinance, which is the Code of Ordinances, the board shall be composed of 9 members appointed by the Buncombe County Commissioners. All board members must be residents of Buncombe County. The term will be 3 years. There are no term limits. Then we get into officers. Chair and vice chair would be the 2 officers. And Mr. Knorr suggested that we add the board members shall elect a chair and vice chair by majority vote upon the initial passage of these rules, and then each year thereafter at the first full meeting of the board each fiscal year, which would be in July. Yeah, I don't have, okay. The secretary will be the planning and the planning and development department director shall serve as secretary. The secretary is not a member of the board. The planning and development director may delegate these duties to someone else. And we would change operating procedures in this to rules of procedure. So just to be sure of that. So just for everybody's thing, so I don't have to do this every time it is, we will change operating procedure to rules of procedure throughout the document. And then we will shorten, instead of saying rules of procedure, we'll just say rules, if that's okay with everybody. All right. I got a bunch of thumbs up. All right, board meeting. So the board shall hold a regular meeting each Monday, the third Monday of each month. The meeting shall be held at the boardroom located at 30 Valley Street. And the meeting location and time shall be posted on the county website, and public notice shall be given for each meeting. I didn't have any changes there. Special meeting, the chair or 3 members of the board may call a special meeting. We would need to notice the special meeting. And I didn't see any changes to that, that it shall, the notice has to be at least 48 hours before the meeting, and we will need to post the notice probably on the door at 200 College Street and at the door of probably 30 Valley Street where the meeting is held. If a special meeting is called to deal with an emergency, the notice requirements of this rule do not apply. However, persons who call emergency meetings shall take reasonable action to inform the members of the public, and the only business to be conducted with the emergency may be discussed at the meeting. We had no changes for special meetings. That's so. All right. So moving on to agenda, the secretary, Mr. North, suggested that we change it to shall be responsible for preparing the regular agenda for the regular meetings. An individual who is not a member of the board or group that wishes to have an item of business placed on the agenda shall make a request to the chair and the secretary no later than 2 weeks prior to the next scheduled meeting. The request must be in writing and must state the nature of the matter. The final agenda for each meeting will be approved by the chair, the county staff head, and the planning and development director. Mr. Noor deleted the planning and development director, so just the final agenda will be approved by the chair. Okay. So no one has any objections to those changes? All right.
Just to know the chair is out and that agenda item will be. So that makes sense. Anyone will always be someone in the planning department who can get something on the agenda if the chair is on the floor. We should be here.
Okay, so you're saying that's why there's a need to have the planning and development director included in that in case somebody is inaccessible.
Most times, if you want to go out of town, you still have your email and be able to sign off on something like that.
If if it's me, that's probably very true. It may not be me, so we need to think about that too. But how do y'all agree with it? Y'all think
Yeah,
that-
I've seen the whole in the absence of vice chair shall approve. Standard.
All right. I think we're all in agreement. Go with the chair and then vice chair if,
Chair, I'm on.
We are. Did you get that? Sure.
While you're doing that, I want to ask something about the membership. It says, it's got to be in the county. What if a member, do we need to put something in there if a member moves out of the county? Do we need to address that, or is that just giving back?
Normally, when there is a requirement that the person be in the county, when that person moves out of the county, they no longer are eligible to serve in that seat. So they would, probably be asked to resign. If not, they would be
I just
removed.
didn't know whether we need to put it in there.
I don't think that that's something that you all need to deal with.
When you read paragraph B on page 1 membership, it said pursuant to the statute, the board shall be composed of 9 members. Does that need to be added, or is that just?
We could add in there pursuant to the Buncombe County Code of Ordinance. It's not necessarily the state statute, but it's the Code of Ordinances. There's a code section that talks about the planning board.
Just added those words, I didn't know if they were needing to be in there.
We can add that. Yeah, that's probably the best. That's a good suggestion.
Ask a question about what Mike had said, not that I want to complicate anything, but is it possible that it could be interpreted that somebody who moves out of county while they're serving their term, they might say, well, I was elected, I was appointed for this term, and when my term is up, I can no longer serve. Is there any ambiguity in there? Do you think?
No,
I did share.
yes, okay.
Is that it?
And then in
Members?
membership, they were going to say pursuant to the Buncombe County Code of Ordinances.
I kind of feel like that sentence says all members of the board shall be registered. Because it uses the word shall, it implies mandatory. So that it's going to be registered longer and longer. You're outside of that statement.
All good questions. All right, where are we? We are for presiding officer. The chair of the board shall preside if they are present. If the chair is absent, the vice chair shall preside. And in the rare case that the chair and the vice chair are both absent, another member of the board shall be designated by majority vote to preside over that meeting. We state that the chair has the following powers: to rule on motions in or out of order, including the right to rule out of order a motion patently offered for the obstructive or dilatory purposes, to determine whether this, oh, wait a minute, am I? Yes, okay, to determine whether the speaker has gone beyond reasonable standards of courtesy in there. We had his, which I agree with. We need to change it to their, suggested by Mr. Noor, remarks, and to entertain a rule on objections from other members on this ground, to call a brief recess at any time, and to adjourn in an emergency.
Question says the chair shall have the following powers that the slightly better if it said presiding member. Like, we're gonna see chairs, but that was never used.
That's fine. No, that's fine. No, that's a, that we can change it. You got that?
Take the original phrase.
Chair or vice chair?
I'll say that.
Get confused where I am. All right, yeah, where you got that, like with it says the chair. Okay, got it. All right. Attendance, that attendance is, we basically state that all board members are expected to attend a minimum of 75% of all regularly scheduled meetings each year. Failure to meet this attendance requirement may result in a recommendation by the board to the Board of Commissioners that the board member be removed. Mr. Norris suggested to remove and/or the secretary. So it seems to me that any recommendation regarding removing someone would be made by the board and the board alone.
Rationale.
Yeah,
I don't disagree.
Yeah, passion on this. Kind of been out there. Appropriate boundaries.
We're good with that?
All right. 6, quorum, basically a majority of the actual membership of the board, excluding vacant seats, shall constitute a quorum. A member who has withdrawn from a meeting without being excused by a majority vote of the remaining members shall be counted as present for the purposes of determining whether or not a quorum is present. So we established the quorum. If somebody gets up and leaves without being excused, that does not destroy the quorum.
Which means that, I guess, I should probably, that together, I probably shouldn't ask.
I think it's also just once we establish a form for the plus of the
And is a tactic sometimes used by others. So yeah, hopefully we don't have to do it.
And that's one of those things you don't really think about people doing until, yeah.
All right, voting. No vote may be taken without a quorum being present. Upon good cause shown and with the general consent of the members present, any member may make an appearance at a regular meeting by teleconference or other electronic means and vote on any matter coming before the board at such meeting. Such appearance will not count towards the calculation of the necessary members present to constitute a quorum. Okay, so the Board of Commissioners, and this is sort of, each board is a little bit different. There's a state statute that requires the Board of Commissioners to be present at the meeting in which they vote on an issue. That requirement is not necessarily applicable to the planning board, to other boards. So really, it is up to you as to decide how you sort of want to handle that. Whether you, if somebody, one of the ways to handle that is that you need to be present to vote. You can attend by teleconference, but you can't vote. The other option would be is that you can attend by teleconference and vote. And the third option, and those are really the two options. And the other question is whether somebody who attends by teleconference counts towards the quorum. Because it also, with the Board of County Commissioners, they don't count towards the quorum if they're attending by teleconference.
So for this board, as it currently stands, if there's not a quorum, there wouldn't be a vote anyway, so it wouldn't matter about somebody calling in and doing that. But if there is a quorum already, and somebody happens to be out, like one person, then they would have the ability to call in and vote, as long as we were voting anyway.
Upon the board approving.
That happened. Right. Right.
I like that.
Down.
Yeah, that is kind of a gray area right now as to how hybrid meetings work in the state of North Carolina. There really hasn't been a lot of guidance. Normally, you can have a hybrid or an electronic meeting if the governor has declared a state of emergency, such as when COVID was going through. However, the governor has withdrawn that state of emergency for COVID. So those rules don't necessarily apply. So we go back to the whole whether or not you need to be present to vote. But I'm of the opinion that if it's in your rules of procedure as to how you define that, I think that you're pretty safe in moving forward. We'll jot that down, and I will take a look at that, Mr. Knorr, and figure out what if we need to do that. We haven't been doing that with our other boards that have met. But then again, we've been really trying to avoid hybrid meetings. We've been really either you're meeting in person or you're meeting electronically, and we're not kind of doing both. So
how do we want to keep it? Perhaps. At the time we take it, or urgency, vote, what?
Interesting. Whether you paragraph. Either it does or it doesn't.
we do have in the voting upon good cause shown. So there has to be, I guess there theoretically there should be a good reason as to why you're not attending. And then with the consent of the board members present. So you would say, I can't attend because of this reason. And the board would vote and say, that's all right, you can participate. So that could be your kind of your way to determine if somebody's abusing that privilege. Because I agree, that's what you don't want to have as a board member attending all the time by Zoom. Can I, okay, move forward? All right. The minutes, the secretary shall prepare the minutes, the minutes of each board meeting. Copies shall be made available to each board member before the next regular board meeting. And Mr. Noor added the following, at which the minutes are proposed to be, or I'm sorry, at which the minutes are to be proposed for approval. At each regular meeting where the approval of the minutes is included in the agenda, the board shall review the I'm having troubles today, minutes of the previous regular meeting, as well as any special meeting that have occurred since the previous regular meeting, and make the necessary revisions and approve the minutes as originally drafted or revised. The public may obtain a copy of the minutes at the Planning and Development Department. The minutes are also available on the Buncombe County website. No, that's fine. All right. The public comment, okay. Can't type with you. Thanks. All right. So, a public comment period. So we had the secretary of the board shall include, so instead it just says a public comment period following new business shall be included in the agenda of every regular meeting.
Yeah, or you can put somewhere in there that they have it for people that's got to leave. Speak first.
Well, I think what John's saying is we just put a public comment at the beginning of the meeting instead of the end of the meeting, which would solve the problem. It would make it that we can count on it. I think that's important for people to know when it's. And this doesn't preclude, like if we're having a zoning hearing, that has its own public comment.
So we would change following new business to after the adoption of the minutes.
If we're all, I don't have any problem with it. That's not a bad suggestion.
A question concerning public comment. Like, does anyone have the authority to come up and speak on anything? For example, last meeting, we had a lady speaking about pet waste, and I don't think that we could do anything about the problem, but yet she was addressing the board. If there are issues in concerning the board, do we really have to listen to the board? Because from what I understand, her issue wasn't a board issue.
It had to do with zoning.
Well, it was about rules and regulations of how much she's having to be paid, how much she's having to pay to get permits for the job. I think I saw the news already, so we may have to revise the cost of permits. And I don't think that the cost of permits is a planning, because that's not one of our issues.
No, we don't.
And so, in saying that, I mean, if their comment isn't related to us while we listen,
You may have to listen to a person for a certain length of time to determine what their issue is. Does it fall within our purview or is it outside of our board's authority? So it's really kind of limit. Other than the ordinance, really kind of limits. I think you need to hear people try to figure out what their issue is. And then if it's outside the board, we can refer them to the right.
I thought that she was going to get you, which is kind of all the thing. Felt like she primarily did because she didn't know where else to go. Party place. That may be valid or not, but that's what I thought.
I think that's a great point, and Eric mentioned too that sometimes we're listening to things maybe not germane, but I've also found that some people come to boards and they don't know where else to go, and so they speak their piece, and then a staff member might grab them and say, "Hey, I heard what you had to say. That's over here, and how can I help you get where you're trying to get?" And the sacrifices that we get to listen to a few minutes of comments that may not help that much.
Like the 3-minute rule kind of protects us from that. But after 3 minutes, the discretion of the board to grant them additional time. So,
well, but we didn't. She went on for about, I don't know, 8 or 9, maybe 10 minutes. And
And there's some office space that it calls.
particular rule.
I mean, I heard maybe several times that we had.
I don't remember. I mean, got once she got up about that. I don't.
It's really important that the public feels they have the ability to address and we shouldn't put too many limitations on that.
Oh, no, I'm not against that at all. I'm just saying, you know, if let's say we have 10 people that are here with issues that really don't affect us, I mean, can we adequately address everything?
We've not had that. That's not been.
I hear you. I'm not sure how it got that. There's a way to do it. Having a problem, that's it won't be your fault. Thank you, though. I think at least having that. In the wrong place. Thank you, though. What they about that?
Maybe we could address a little bit of it as a piece and it does come thing. Question. Beginning. This may not be all I do agree. I think it's hard to figure out what this not
Especially if they don't know. I don't think people come here. That's not like take a public thing. I don't think they come here with the idea of just wasting time. They come here because where they can feel like they can work. And we want them to go that way. But I think John's point is good.
I just thought it's nothing written in stone.
No, it's a worthwhile thought because people probably don't want to get up and talk because they're wasting their time or their time.
It's not a waste of time. It's just that we really could do that.
Right.
I want you to say what you got to say.
I don't want to feel bad.
And if we see it heading in that direction, then
Well, it's probably, and we've not had to do this necessarily, because we don't have, we don't have a public comment. But the commission meetings, they always go over the public comment. What they always have public comment at commission meetings, but that may not be a bad practice to do it here, because then it just gets it out of the way. People hear it, yeah.
do we want them to do 3 minutes of audit?
No, I like free, well, they say, but I wonder if somebody needs to be.
Yeah, I like
time
being able to.
Yeah. No, as I said, if you have somebody who timekeeper, when it starts now. So,
Well, we've been pretty lenient with people going over without, having to get them right. We're not saying it's too this.
Well, in the meetings where it has to go, it's just like, have one, like 4 hours. So, and that, we didn't stick to that, and then people were time, and this whole kind of stuff. But you have to, the meeting, that much public comment, because you can't get through it, everybody can. But we've not really had that as an issue. Right.
Got 80 more people.
Yeah, 8 or 4 hours.
Yeah, because all eight people do the same thing.
Right.
Yeah.
Then, one person could,
My institution, 8. That includes last back. Station. Looking at 8 cents, a lot more stuff. Try to delegate. This is good.
So yes, the next bullet point is the time limit for any individual or representative addressing the board shall be 3 minutes, unless a majority of the board agrees to additional time. A group which is represented by at least, Mr. Norris suggests 4 people. The county, generally, we had 8 people in the audience, may elect 1 representative to speak for 10 minutes of time. Can be awarded to that representative if at least 4 people in the audience relinquish any rights to speak on the issue. So essentially it's 3 minutes. If you're a group of 4 and you want to elect 1 representative, that person gets 10 minutes. And the board at its discretion can extend for additional time should it desire.
I look kind of closely at that and give a lot of thought to it. And what I've seen is there has been smaller groups. There's been a couple meetings where we had very large, but for the most part, it is 4 or 5 weeks. So I think kind of like the drop to 4. If each of the 4 talk is 12 minutes, they they're probably focused on what groups I've seen so far have wanted to do that. They want to take advantage of having those folks prepared and take on good comments. So I do like that.
I think that since that applies to not much, just anything here, a few more.
Okay, we'll go with 4.
That could always be changed down the road. But for now, I think 4 makes good sense for what we're observing.
Okay, the next bullet point, each speaker during the public comment period shall be limited to one appearance at each regular meeting of the board. Mr. Noor deleted this language. And the board reserves the right to deny any public address on a subject previously presented to the board. Um,
Although that language doesn't say what.
Okay, we will delete after the board. We'll delete that. The next, you're good. Okay. Uh, the next one is the board is not expected to comment on matters brought to the board during public comment. Mr. Noor suggests that we end at that point, and then we have a but should delay action or comment until staff has had an opportunity to research the subject matter and report necessary and relevant information to all board members.
It's also, I agree too. I think that's within the purview of the chair to decide whether they want to delay something or not. Just the reason the board decide that, maybe we want to hear from staff or maybe it's something about what the chairperson does.
So we'll delete, are we going to adopt Mr. Noor's changes and delete that, but should delay any action or comment until hearing from staff? Okay. All right. Do that. All right. Next one. Any individual speaking on public comment shall only address the entire board, and any polling of the board is inappropriate for public comment. No changes to that one. Does anybody have any questions? No. Persons addressing the board are expected to observe decorum of the chamber and be respectful to the board and the public, to refrain from the use of profanity or foul language. And we had, that was suggested as a delete by Mr. Noor, and to refrain from making disclosures prohibited by the Personnel Act with respect to county employees. I think what happens is that if you get somebody who's basically negatively commenting about staff, an individual, like specifically singling out an employee and, making allegations about that employee, about their conduct, about all that, some of that stuff may be personnel that really should be disclosed in a public forum. That doesn't happen that much, at least in this forum. So most of what we have in here was derived from the county commissioners. So obviously it's a different forum. But I think that is something that you should be aware of if you decide to delete that, not to basically let the public comment section be a public flogging of an individual staff member without. to the extent, but once again, discussing a personnel, which, you know, theoretically, if you have a complaint against a staff member regarding the performance of their duty of an individual staff member, not saying the planning department did this, that's more general. But when you're saying, you know, Jillian Phillips did X, Y, and Z, that's not really, that tends to be more of a public, not a public, but a personnel matter, and that information would be protected.
But can you provide just a really, really high level view of the Personnel Act?
Well, pursuant to North Carolina General Statute 153A 98, it basically states that personnel information about county employees is not a public record, so that you cannot disclose certain things about an employee is prohibited by law. In fact, if you willfully do so, you could be charged criminally for doing so. There are about 11 things that are considered public record, such as the name, date of hire, salary, what department they work in, more or less. Those are public records and can be disclosed. But when you're getting into disciplinary actions, performance questions, things like that, those are considered not public records and not to be disclosed. Does that help you kind of when we're talking about that? I mean, in all honesty, you're not going to know whether they're making a bad disclosure until it already comes out. So, I mean, it may give the chair, at least if someone is veering off path, it would at least give you a little more authority to try to rein them in, saying that that's a personnel matter. We're not going to discuss that in a public forum. You need to talk to the department director.
It would bother me if you're saying, John, what you tried. It says wasn't part of the Personnel Act. Do that, but now I was looking for action about this, so that it could be helpful.
All right. So we'll leave that in then. And if there's any, you can always take it out later if that's somehow.
I have one question.
Sure.
Comment about it. The very first part of that paragraph says persons addressing the board, and then if you skip by it says to refrain from making disclosures prohibited by the Personnel Act. I can see a member of the public saying, you know, I want to address the board, but I don't really know what's covered by the Personnel Act, and I can see the being disconcerted by that. I kind of feel like that's a function of the chair to monitor public comment and to see, oh, you're going to do something that's a Personnel Act disclosure. And we're going to ask you to refrain from that and see us after the hearing, or please talk to staff or whatever. But I could see where that might cause just an ordinary layperson concern. I don't know if what I'm going to discuss is covered by the Personnel Act, so I don't know whether I can talk or not. It not be viewed as pressing speech because of ignorance. I could see people saying that. And so I'm just throwing that out there.
I mean, once again, it's very difficult just because it's almost like you're trying to put the genie back in the bottle after the genie's already gotten out of the bottle. So, I mean, we are good either way.
chairperson.
Undesirable job.
I would probably just, my recommendation, my advice would be to leave it in, at least for the time being. And if it turns into a problem, we can address it at a later date. But I would like the chair to have at least something to hang her hat on should this situation kind of arise. Not that you will stop it, but that you can direct it and say, hey, that's getting into personnel stuff. You need to talk to the department director.
And I guess it is visually there. So, right there.
That's sort of what it is. All right, the chairman may rule out of order any comments made during this part of the agenda that are rude, inappropriate, or intended to harass a person or group of people, or that do not address the entire board, and is authorized to take reasonable and appropriate measures to ensure compliance with these rules. And then Mr. Knorr added the following: unless a majority of the board agrees to override the chair's determination.
So that's if someone gets up and says, "I'm going to John," and I say that's out of order.
Let it settle or true. Or, yeah, maybe. Bad days.
And that can happen.
Kind of like emergency.
There's also the occasional person who really has a matter of public concern, but addresses it in a very harsh way. And you may decide, really, as to his substance, I want to hear more. I'm not really liking how he's presenting it, but I think that addition does allow the board to kind of decide, okay, he's a rough speaker, but it's really an important matter, so I'm going to memorialize it. But thoughts. So I kind of like it for that reason.
All right, consensus?
Yeah.
Okay, we'll leave it in. Next, amendment to operating procedures. These procedures may be amended at any regular meeting or at any properly called special meeting. That includes an amendment of the operating procedures. As the stated purpose of the meeting, a quorum must be present at the meeting at which the amendments are discussed and approved, and any amendments must be approved by a majority of the members present at the meeting. So essentially, a majority of members present at the meeting can amend the rules. Sometimes there's a 2/3 rule or something like that. But we usually just say a majority can amend the rules. Unless changing the,
Unless we were in that meeting, I guess, change the rules. I guess then go back to.
I think that in order for the majority to apply, you have to have the changing of the rules as an agenda item. You can't just randomly, I think we're both on the same page. You can't just randomly during a procedure go, oh, we're going to change that rule right now and have a vote. You have to actually have it planned out. Are we both on the same page? Okay. Other procedural matters. Section G, actions by the board. The board shall proceed by motion. Any member, including the chair, may make a motion. All motions require a second before the motion can be discussed. A member may make only one motion at a time. A substantive motion is out of order while another substantive motion is pending. A motion shall be adopted by a majority of the votes cast, a quorum being present unless required by these rules or the laws of North Carolina. The chair shall state the motion and then open the floor for debate. Mr. Knorr deleted the on it, which seems like that's an okay change? That's all right. First, a member who has not spoken on the issue shall be recognized before someone who has already spoken. And to the extent possible, the debate shall alternate between opponents and proponents of the measure. All right. There were no other changes to that. All right. In section 2, in addition to substantive, we have proposals. Mr. Noor changed to motions, which I agree. The following procedural motions, and we have and no others. Mr. Noor suggested we delete that, which I don't have any problem with. Shall be in order. All motions require a second before the motion can be discussed. Unless otherwise noted, each motion is debatable, may be amended, and requires a majority of vote for adoption. Is everybody good with? Yeah, I'm good with those changes. So got them. All right, now for the fun part. In order of priority, if applicable, these procedural motions are: 1, to adjourn. The motion may be made at any time by any member of the board and will require a majority vote. To take recess. A call to follow the agenda. This motion must be made at the first reasonable opportunity or it is waived. Mr. Noor added the following: this motion does not require a second and is not debatable.
So the language of saying that the proponent will not approve the agenda.
Yeah.
That's right.
That's not really happening.
No,
Required above it is all the debatable. Yeah. Maybe you did the distance of
yeah.
So is it inconceivable to have something happen that that's law?
Well, right. The next one is to suspend the rules. The motion requires a vote equal to, we had a quorum. Mr. Noor suggests a 2/3 majority of the members present. Most of the things that I'm going through right now don't happen very often, and they're kind of like when things really are starting to get haywire. so these are because the problem is that a lot of these rules state that you'll refer to Robert's Orders of Procedure, and that's not a very realistic thing to do, since Roberts is about that thick and is not very user friendly. So we're trying to at least outline some of the things that may happen, just so that we have them in our rules. If
And I do kind of want to agree with all of this discussion because the agenda is important because of notice due process and making sure that people know what, you may look at the agenda and say, well, I'm not going to attend that, my issue's not on there. And then if you go off agenda, then they have a complaint. They say, well, if I'd known you were going to add that, I would have attended. So staying on agenda is really critical to the process. In my opinion.
So we do that right at the beginning.
And one other thing while we first go kind of in this section, back up to where debate and all that stuff. Our typical response in here has been to hear whatever we're hearing, and then we have kind of like an informal discussion, and then somebody makes a motion. That informal discussion is still applicable. I mean, we can still do that.
Oh,
But-
sure.
But when somebody makes a motion, then you have to get a second before you discuss it any further. Is that, am I understanding that correctly?
Mhm.
Great. Thank you.
Now, the next one is to defer consideration, a subset. Yes, I think we're agreeing to both of the changes on page, whatever page that is, to D and F. So we are now on F of this section, to defer consideration. This is a motion where consideration has been deferred, expires 100 days after, unless there is a motion to revive consideration is adopted. So there is a possibility that you could defer considering something for 100 days unless somebody brings a motion yeah, these aren't happening. This one's happened to me before. A call of a previous question. This motion is not in order until every member of the board has at least one opportunity to speak. Because I've had it at one time where there was a motion presented and then they called the question immediately before there was any debate over something. And that didn't sit well with a lot of people. So that to postpone to a certain time or day, that's pretty self-explanatory. To refer to committee, you can refer something to a committee if you have a committee. A motion to amend, an amendment to a motion must be germane to the subject matter of the motion, but it may achieve the opposite effect of the motion. Any amendment to the proposed ordinance shall be reduced in writing on the call of any member, including the chair. To revive consideration, the motion, this is basically, we talked about deferring. This is basically before the 100 days is expired, you can vote to consider the matter earlier. A substantive motion on which consideration has been deferred expires 100 days after the deferral, unless the motion to revive is adopted. To reconsider, a motion made by a member who voted with the prevailing side, the motion must be made at the same meeting at which the original vote was taken. The motion cannot interrupt deliberation or a pending matter, but is in order at any time before adjournment. To rescind or repeal, Mr. Norris suggests we delete that. No, and the next one is to ratify.
Back up to
Sure.
L for a second. I'm having grammar brain cramp. The motion to reconsider must be made by a member. Clear. The motion must be made at the same meeting at the original vote was taken. I'm saying, wait. You mean the same board?
Yeah.
Obviously not the same date.
Yeah, we've had
Same day.
Same day.
Spin.
All
So
right.
makes a motion, you vote for it.
Okay.
Table that motion. Hang out there, that allows. Bring it back up. They have to do it.
All right, so this is not related to motion to defer.
This is about your individual vote. Okay. Yeah, let's really help.
The next one is a motion to prevent reconsideration for 6 months. This motion shall be in order immediately following the defeat of a substantive motion and at no time and at no other time. Approval of this, Mr. Noor has made some amendments. Approval of the motion prevents a motion from being reconsidered for 6 months.
M and N, are we getting rid of those?
Yes, I think no one said that they feel the need for a motion to rescind or repeal or to ratify. This is basically when you rule on something and then you basically say, we're not going to talk about it for another 6 months. The next one is to renew a motion. A motion that is defeated may be renewed at any subsequent meeting unless a motion to prevent reconsideration has been adopted. So the subsequent meeting, to your question, you could raise that motion again.
So best practice, if we've had something that's taken up a lot of time, but we're clear about it, somebody wants that motion. To prevent- Okay.
I've been on boards where they try to defeat your vote by just putting it on the agenda every month after that. Like 24 months. Yeah, for attrition, waiting on a error.
A withdrawal of a motion may be withdrawn by the introducer at any time before the vote. Next one is duty to vote. Once a meeting has been convened, every member, including the chair, must vote unless they have, and this is a change added by Mr. Noor, they have a conflict of interest or are excused by a majority vote of the member present. A member who wishes to be excused from voting shall inform the chair, who shall take a vote of the remaining members. The board may excuse a member from voting, but only upon, and this is another addition, the member answering questions concerning the reasons for the request to be excused, which can include questions concerning the member's own financial interest, official conduct, or matters on which the member is prohibited from voting due to conflict of interest under North Carolina General Statute 160D 109. We had in there 114-234, which is the criminal statute about violating. It's just been that's, you know, for purposes of this, we haven't entirely 160D'd all of our things yet. So for the purpose of this rule, the question of the compensation and allowances of a member of board does not involve a member's own financial interest or official conduct. Refusal to vote with or without cause shall be recorded as an affirmative vote.
Question about the board's suggestion. It feels to me like most vote unless they have a conflict of interest or are, sounds like they'll have a conflict of interest and I say that I no longer excuse. That's the way I read that.
You're done.
Or parts, but put that in there. Other reasons that are not.
Because there's a difference between a conflict and an appearance of a conflict. And sometimes the board member may have an appearance that they just don't want to have.
I agree with the intent. Just the way this reads to me is I have to vote unless I have a conflict of interest. If I say I have a conflict of interest, the way this reads, it sounds like that's all. I don't need to vote.
Right, the conflict of interest is defined very narrowly.
Okay. And that may be right.
We were reading conflict of interest.
I agree with that.
I have a quick question.
Mhm.
Other boards I've been on allow you to abstain on voting, but this rule makes it clear that even if you refuse, it's an affirmative vote. Why does this board or this set of rules not allow for a member to abstain?
Well, even if you abstain under most of the things, I, I, I don't know, but usually when someone abstains, it's still a vote in the affirmative.
So it's in the statute. Okay.
certain cases, that all that have to vote and send it out.
I'm cool with that. It's in the statute. I just wasn't aware if that was in the statute or not.
Yeah, no, most of the things I've at least, now obviously there's always exceptions, but usually an abstention is a vote in the affirmative, or if you get up and leave, that's also a vote in the affirmative. So are we good with those changes regarding the conflict of interest that we've done? All right, well, we are done with the things. Next thing, compliance with North Carolina law, which this should be no thing. In conducting its business, the board shall comply with all applicable North Carolina laws, including but not limited to open meeting laws, public record laws, and laws setting forth the power and duties of local planning boards. To assist the board in compliance, the secretary shall maintain a current copy of relevant North Carolina general statutes and make them available to the board upon request.
Can we add one thing to that paragraph?
Sure.
The personnel law. It's an important part. Can we also just specifically
Okay.
list it again here?
So how about we put open meetings law, public record laws, personnel laws, and does that work for everybody?
Yeah, just specifically list that one.
Sure. Okay. The next one is something that Mr. Noor suggested we add, conflicts of interest. A member shall not vote on a motion where the outcome of the matter being considered is reasonably likely to have a direct, substantial, and readily identifiable financial impact on the member or a person with which the member shares a close familiar relationship. The member shall not vote on any proposed zoning map or ordinance amendment if the landowner or the property subject to the rezoning petition or the applicant for a text amendment is a person with whom the member has a close familiar business or other associational relationship. If an objection is raised to the member's participation at or prior to the hearing or vote on a particular matter or motion, and that member does not recuse him or herself, the remaining members of the board shall by majority vote rule on the objection. For purposes of these rules, close familiar relationship means a spouse, parent, child, brother, sister, grandparent, or grandchild. The term also includes step, half, and in-law relationships. I agree.
I think that's staying right to the statute is very wise here. Yeah. No more, no less.
No, I think the big thing that you may want to be aware of that not a lot of people are aware of where this may come into play is if you serve on a board of directors of a nonprofit or something like that who's coming before who has a zoning issue or something like that. That is usually the one that not everybody's aware of. So if you're on the board of directors of a nonprofit, you're needing to get a zoning change for a development that you're doing, you may need to recuse yourself from that because So we're almost done. Reference to, does everybody agree to include the conflict of interest language? Okay. Last section, reference to Robert's Rules of Order. To the extent not provided for in these rules, and to the extent that reference does not conflict with the spirit of these rules, the board shall refer to Robert's Rules of Order for unresolved procedural questions. So at the end of the day, if these rules don't cover it, and we would go to Roberts for guidance. Mr. Norris suggested the following additions to this section. Pursuant to North Carolina General Statute 160D 308, these rules shall be posted in a prominent place on the board's website. And finally, these rules were initially adopted on September 18, 2023.
I agree with both of those.
All right, that is, we have gone through the whole shebang.
So do we need to vote on that, or are we just accepting it as is, or we get a?
What commissioners said that?
Okay.
And then we can vote on it.
Okay, sounds good. And how about the officers? Will there like officers?
So that's what I'm going to do.
The rules of procedure.
For closing that discussion, just, is there, can I ask an off-road question? Is there any update on placing Cindy on board?
It is currently still open. We only got one application in the last room, so we have someone who, I will say that, there is actually amendment. So someone who has some design or with, or works with ordinances might be a good person. But yeah, it's open again. So we're going to try to get a few more applications. So if you have someone you know, let me know and I'll send you the link.
Okay. So, any other things that we need to discuss before we get public comment? Oh, okay, very good. Then, we will now open public comment, and Ms. Stiles, you have the floor.
As a testament to how important I think this next issue is, I sat through all of that to have my opportunity to speak. The mountains that surround us in Buncombe County are ancient. For hundreds of thousands of years, they have moderated the flow of streams, creeks, and rivers by letting rainwater and snow soak in and then discharging it at a fairly steady rate into the streams and creeks. This system only works as long as the mountains are able to absorb most of the rain that falls. By allowing our steep slopes to be compromised by too much impervious surfaces like houses, roads, and driveways, we are destroying a system that has worked for eons. A case in point. On August the 28th, I talked to a person that lives in Walnut Cove in South Buncombe County. She was concerned that after that issue of no water at Christmas in the winter, now in the summer, their area was required to conserve water. The next day, August 29th, while watching the news, the commentator reported that the conserved water requirement had been lifted because recent rains had brought the level of the Mills River back up. So apparently, the level of the Mills River where Asheville gets the water to serve its South Buncombe area water customers, had gotten so low that there was no longer adequate water for those customers. It is not just in times of heavy or extended rainfall that excessive runoff is a problem. It is a problem every time it rains, and water that should be soaking into the mountains is running off of homes and roads on steep slopes and away down the creeks, and so is not available during dry times to keep the creeks and rivers up. You must figure out how or if steep slopes can be developed and still allow the ancient system that moderates the flow of water in our creeks and streams to continue to work like it has since long before humans showed up here. Every day, the earth movers are working, the contractors are building, the pavers are laying down blacktop on our steep slopes. When it rains, the water is leaving faster and faster. We must make sure new developments are much better at letting the rain soak into the mountains, and we must require retrofitting of those developments already built so that much less water is lost to runoff. And we should have started 10 years ago.
Very good. And thank you, Ms. Stiles. We appreciate it. And I think the fact that Ms. Stiles did sit here through all of that discussion just to make public comment indicates that we really need to have that at the beginning of the meeting. So thank you. And that will happen on the next agenda, right? Okay, thank you. All right, then I guess we're ready to have a motion to adjourn.
So move.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Very good. We're adjourned. Thank you, everybody. Very interesting meeting.